Lori Balue, a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and adapted certified functional health coach, helping women over 50 lose weight for good and to reclaim the second half of their life to live pain-free, stay active, reverse age beautifully. She is on a mission to empower women to choose health as their wealth over becoming overweight and having more health issues as they age. So we're healing women around the globe. And Lori, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to have this conversation because so many women need to know all of what you just said. You know, sometimes it can be a mouthful, but it's like there's so many stepping stones into getting healthy, and just getting this word out and getting on the right track to do it is just so important.
It's so important for all of us, and we're suffering. And I know in my 40s I was suffering, my 50s I was suffering,
Yeah.
and I didn't find this journey until 55. And so now I'm almost 70, and I've never felt better in my life. But would you tell our listeners and those watching a little bit about yourself and how you got into this health and wellness space?
Yeah. So I am, well, basically just a woman like any other woman, but I've been on a journey. And unfortunately, I had obesity and depression as a child. And so that could take a big toll on someone. And it's interesting because I keep looking back as to why I was the only one in my family that had obesity and depression, where, you know, we were just coming into the 70s with a processed food, and my dad tried to take butter away from us. And we're like, no, we're going to eat butter. And, you know, it was all those processed foods that were starting to come on the market. And I'm just ended up being depressed and overweight. And so my mom tried to take me to the medical center to figure out why I have depression. And so, of course, I didn't talk to anybody, so they couldn't help me because I couldn't talk, because I'm like, I'm depressed. I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
And so she was into reading Adele Davis, and she was trying to work on my brother's hyperactivity at the time. And so that was her go-to. And so she just decided to put me on the Atkins diet. Well and behold, that reversed my depression. She reset my metabolism because she noticed that I did better with amino acids. So all of a sudden I lost 50 pounds and reset my metabolism. So that's something that actually got me through high school at the same weight. I was about 150 because I'd gotten up to 200 pounds. And so that was the journey. That was where I started. But you know what? Without that push, I probably wouldn't be an obesity survivor today, because I learned that from an internal point of view of practicing it and knowing that something can work. Because I went on a low carb diet off and on over the years, and I never stayed with it because I didn't know why I was doing it. It was just a diet. Mm-hmm. And so I would go on and I'd come off, and then I'd go back and forth between all the Weight Watchers or Nutrisystem. So I lived my life on diet, but I wasn't starving. I was gaining weight, and that's where it kind of was. But my weight loss journey specifically started in my mind, in my mid-30s. So here I am with metabolic dysfunction. And my highest weight, it was 225 pounds. So on this one specific day, I walked in with my 8-year-old son, and my husband was sitting on the sofa, didn't even look at me. And then he just said, "When are you going to lose the weight?" Well, at that very moment, I started my weight loss journey, because my husband told me I needed to lose the weight. So I went out and bought an exercise bike, and I started, reading books, which empowered me and really kind of give me some information, because I'd never really read anything about dieting. I was just either on the Atkins or off the Atkins, or trying diet, just living by diets. But I was addicted to food. And I had depression. Every time I had higher weight, I would have more depression. So every time I gained weight, I would have the depression. So even though I would lose the weight, what was interesting was I never lost the depression. And I still had always dealt with allergies and asthma, sinusitis, bronchitis, huge amounts of mucus, just horrendous mucus, and always coughing. And until I did immunology, I think that's the term for it, because I had allergy response 11 months out of the year, and then finally got it down to maybe 1 month out of the year by doing that immunology shots with the doctor. However they did that, but I did lose weight off and on with the diets, but I never lost the dysfunction. I never lost the depression and that asthma. And it wasn't until I started studying functional health and nutrition when I started reading more about that and exploring and finding out that, well, this is pretty much the information about what I'd been doing, which I didn't understand and put two to two together. And I don't know if my brain could do it. I didn't have any brain energy. I was depressed. I mean, like, I always think back, I'm like, how come I couldn't figure this out when I was younger? But it was the fat-free era. And it wasn't anything to do with about eating protein and fat. It was about just eating, go ahead and have the sugar. You just don't eat any fat. But it never made me feel good. And so one of the things that I ended up doing was, as I worked at a natural food store, I started reading more, started understanding functional health and nutrition. And of course, I got a hold of the Wheat Belly book by Dr. William Davis, and that one changed my life. Why We Get Fat by Gary Tobbs. That was
Mhm.
it took a while for me to really get this in because I was still addicted to sugar. I was addicted to the wheat. I was addicted to the sugar. And you know what got me off of that? HCG diet. I actually did HCG diet and I felt really
Mhm.
good. The weight loss comes off, but you get the wheat and the sugar out of your brain. And so then you start to kind of really like, wow, that was something that makes a difference. But the only thing is, as soon as you bring that sugar back in, as soon as you bring the wheat or any honey back in, because I wasn't doing a lot of sugar, but it was the honey that did me in, you
Right,
know?
right. It's natural. It's okay,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
honey's supposed to be natural and it's supposed to be healthy, but it was almost like complete brain fog. I could just feel it
Right.
coming in. Anytime I'd have a piece of even high quality bread like Ezekiel, I could feel the brain fog coming in. And if I had any honey, I would then go search it out and want to eat more, but I could just feel the weight coming on. I could just feel the depression coming back into my brain. I hated it. And so when I finally discovered the keto diet, when I started learning about the Bulletproof program and I went to the conference, this was my turning point. And this was when I was about 53, 54,
Mhm.
around that
Mhm.
time. So similar to your age journey, it's like you don't know until you actually almost get it handed to you. So like here's somebody telling me that you could have bulletproof coffee and stop eating the fruit and you're going to have better brain health. Well, that's exactly what happened. So I was listening to a 10-year brain cancer survivor, 10-year brain cancer
Wow.
survivor who's
Wow.
a body
Wow.
type scientist. And I asked him afterwards, I asked him a question. I don't remember the question other than the fact that he told me, don't eat fruit for your body type. I'm like, okay. And so I just stopped eating fruit because guess what I was eating? Goji berries, golden berries, mulberries, all those antioxidant rich berries with my trail mix because I was a muncher because I had to eat.
Mhm.
I never went anywhere without any food because it just kept me stable. But
How do you think the depression, it's sort of the chicken or the egg,
mhm,
the depression and I'm going to use the word overweight, but I'm going to ask you some questions about being overweight. Is it the cause of depression, or is it really the food that we've been consuming that causes depression, causes the obesity, which is sort of that vicious circle, because it really isn't easy to lose weight. Would you
mhm.
agree?
Right. No, it's not easy. What's not easy is keeping it off. You can kind of starve yourself, and women are good at that. Like I'm just going to resist everything and starve
Right.
myself for 30 days and lose, a little bit of weight. But you can't keep it off because it's a non-biological issue. Your hunger is always going to win over. So if hunger is going to turn back on, something's going to happen. You're going to eat that bite of that something, and you're going to just all of a sudden get back on all the addictive foods, and you gain all the weight back. So that's what's the hard part about it. And so the question, the question I think you asked is about depression and being overweight. One of the things I noticed is that the more weight I had, the more depression I had. And so the higher my weight went up, the worse the depression was. And so I always had some anxiety and depression eating the diet that I had. But the more I ended up eating the food sensitivities I had, more leaky gut I had, the more leaky brain I had, the more neural dysfunction I had.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
when I look back at everything I've learned now, it's like it was correlated with being more overweight makes it worse. But I never got rid of it completely until I totally ditched all the fruit and all the honey and all the wheat. That was the only way I could get rid of it.
But I'm wonder the the concept that you're being overweight is bad, and we treat people that are overweight bad, and so we look at being overweight as somewhat being weak, and you're just not trying or hard enough. But isn't it true? And I think a lot of your talks, and I've listened to your stuff, that ultimately we're doomed to fail because the food that we recommend for all of us to consume that's healthy turns out to be the cause of our depression and our obesity.
Correct. And it's the problem is it's an insulin issue. It's not a calories in, calories out approach. The problem is it's because of insulin resistance, blood sugar dysregulation, and hormonal driven process that we are driven to eat food, to go out and seek a food if we have our sugar switch flipped on. So I call this that epigenetic sugar switch. But basically, if that switch is on, then we are set to crave food. We will get in the car and go seek food. We will go out and eat the food without even thinking about it, because our body is telling us from that hormonal issue to go eat the food. So we can only have willpower. It can only last so long. Eventually, you're going to give into it. And some people just kind of lose the fight and just stop fighting. It's such a huge problem. And the more you have the brain dysfunction, the harder I think it really is to actually say no to something and to not do it.
I wonder if our hyperphagia is built into our DNA, and meaning that in the availability of a high sugar diet, you're meant to eat as much as you can and get fat, because the actual natural sugars did not exist for any significance during the year.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you did not become hyperphagic and get fat, you were doomed to die.
Right. And that's the hormonal process. That is the way we're designed. So when we have that sugar switch on, when that process is turned on, you cannot stop it unless you take those foods out. But part of the problem there, again, which is a hormonal issue, is people are not getting protein to turn the signal off. And so if you're not going to get the right amount of protein to satiate your body and to turn your signals off, then you're not going to be able to stop eating. And that's what I notice with my clients too, is one of the things that I do for women over 50 is I get them immediately on 30 grams of protein per meal to try to stop that signaling. And that was a client I was talking to her today. She said that very thing. And she goes, oh, I noticed that if I eat more protein, I'm not nibbling as much. And so, to stop the nibbling, you got to get the protein. And that's what they do with the ultra processed food. They're putting all that umami flavor in there, that protein flavor, and your body and your brain are being tricked. And so your brain think, oh, give me more, eat more of that, because that's the protein we're looking for. We need that protein. Well, you're not getting any protein. So your body's tricked to eat all of that food and more. And you're being told not to eat protein and fat. So you're just eating all these carbohydrates and you can't stop because your body is in starving mode. You're not getting nutrients.
Or it's in the mode of eat sugar, get fat to survive the famine, the pestilence, disease, the migration, hibernation, and gestation. So and I don't know if this is true. I mean, men and women are both overweight, but it tends to be the fight for women to be skinny more so than the fat for men in our societies, and so it's harder for women because epigenetically and naturally our DNA says eat, get fat so you can reproduce, and you can gestate and hibernate and create that beautiful life. Which I think is but now talk about, you mentioned the Atkins diet. So tell me, so I'm in what you were in the 70s during your teenage years. I was in the late 60s. I was in the 70s too. And I mean, Atkins was the early 70s, I think, when his book first came out. When did the Atkins diet first get introduced to you? You mentioned as a teenager?
So I'm having trouble with that. I should talk to my mom, but I'm having trouble with the actual years. I believe I didn't get obese till I was in junior high. And so it was, I remember entering junior high feeling chubby, like I started to gain weight in 6th grade. And so it must have been in 8th grade where I really gained to 200 pounds. And so that was, I graduated high school in 81. So if you count back 4 years, that would still be like mid 70s. So that was when,
I graduated 74 high school in Los Angeles also.
So that was the lifesaver that really made the difference. And I didn't know why. So, I mean, to me, it was just a diet. And, my mom was exploring it at the same time, but we just, shoot, the donut truck would drive up to the house. You would get donuts, that was horrible. We
The
went up
Helms truck.
Friday
Did you have
night.
the Helms truck?
Yes.
Yes.
I thought that was the greatest thing around. And we had a dairy down the street. So every time I got allowance, we'd go down the street to get ice cream. But I think part of my problem was I ended up with German measles, and I have a feeling that gave me some leaky gut. And so I ended up with a huge wheat and dairy sensitivity that, those are red on my food sensitivity test, which could have contributed to more me. I was the only one out of 7 kids that became obese, and the only one with that type of depression. And so I'm thinking, I think I was the only one that had that German measles for whatever reason. And I just ended up with leaky gut and a slowed metabolism. That was
so you mentioned you started reading, digging deeper into understanding nutrition.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about the holistic low carb method, and specifically for women over 50. And can you walk us through some of these methods and how you developed this?
Yeah, my holistic low carb method is based on low carb diet, a keto diet, but I also focus on women over 50 because that's when I started my journey. Because at this point, we're so much more insulin resistant without the hormones. So when we're in our 50s and we're starting menopause, hormones are tanked, estrogen is low. Therefore, we're more insulin resistant. So what worked for you in your 40s and 30s is not going to work for you in your 50s. And so you really don't have a choice but to go low carb unless you really just want to continue to get sick and fat. And I don't like to use that term in a derogative way, but it is just kind of the reflective of what's happening in the body is we're getting weight gain because we are insulin resistant. And that insulin resistance, part of that problem is it leads to prediabetes. So it is a disease state as well. So as we're getting into 50, and what I've noticed is that we just need to be on a low carb diet so that we can actually prevent the disease process in the body. So my holistic low carb method is addressing not only diet, I look at it as a weight loss and diabetes solution. Because to me, they're hand in hand. You can't just have one without the other, and you might as well address both if you're going to try to lose the weight. And the thing is, people want to lose the weight, and that's what they come to me for the weight loss. But what's really driving them is this: I don't want to die. I want to live longer. Something's going on in my body. I don't have the health that I had. I have depression, a lot of depression. You can see this because I run a metabolic analysis and a thyroid questionnaire. And then I write it out in a metabolic psychological form that's full of these bubbles and spikes. And it's the endocrine system and the neurological system. And those are huge. That's where all the symptoms are for the most part. And you can see one that could be higher than another. So that's one of the first things I do is I actually run that analysis, find out what's going on in their body specifically, and then they can see it. So this is what you're going through. And you need to see the dysfunction in your body, because if you're going to change your diet and your lifestyle, you need to know why you're doing it. And you need to have a vision and a goal as to why you want to be successful. And so when I run that, they can really see what's going on in their body. And some people can have over 400 to 500 symptomatic symptoms in this metabolic analysis. It's huge. But it's such a good training tool to show them what's happening in their body. And then the next step I do is I run a food sensitivity test. A lot of people out there foo-foo it, don't need it. If you want to go cold turkey in a carnivore and you can do it, great, do it, run with it. That's probably the best way to do it. But I meet my clients where they're at. They're starting, low carb diet and lifestyle, and they want to know why they're feeling the way they're feeling, and they're worried about disease progression. And so when I'm looking at my clients and women over 50, I am looking at, let's get the weight loss off so we could reverse your prediabetes, because everybody who's insulin resistant is probably in a pre-diabetic state. They just don't know it. And so that's what I love about that. It's just a really good process to address all of that. And insulin resistance is the biggest problem. 88% of people are insulin resistant, they're stating. It's a lot.
It is huge. I suspect that the majority have fatty liver.
Mm-hmm.
And I think insulin resistance is liver damage.
I wouldn't be surprised, because when I'm running the lab work, what I'm seeing is fat malabsorption, protein malabsorption, digestive issues, low stomach acid. All of these things need to be addressed. And it's always poor indican, liver function.
Right.
Indican is always elevated.
And we're forgetting the liver is sort of like the main digestive organ system of the body, even more important than the gut. Yeah. And so when it's damaged, you can't metabolize sugars or proteins.
No,
And
no. I
and
mean,
that's
it's all
and
connected. Yeah, I
hu-
could.
it's huge.
Yeah, I
It's
see it in
huge.
the lab work too, because the pancreas, it's the elastase 1, was showing some pancreatic insufficiency. So that starts to elevate to
Hmm.
the point where it's in the yellow or the red, which is, indicating more gut dysfunction and the digestive dysfunction overall, with that blood sugar dysregulation, which is all, it's got to go through the liver. If your liver's not working, then everything's going to slow down and back up.
What's one of the biggest challenges you're finding in this age group, women over 50, in either weight loss or just addressing a lot of these symptoms to get them motivated and moving forward?
A lot of that is sometimes they'll come in, and they don't really necessarily bring it up right away, but some of them want or have been more plant-based, and they're trying to use the labs and trying to use the diet to get healthy, but their brain is still on a plant-based, and they want to use beans or soy or other food, thinking that that's going to give them the health that they're looking for, because they're not used to eating protein. So a lot of this is the women have not been eating enough protein. That might be the biggest thing. And they're worried about the saturated fat and the cholesterol issues. Those are all the things that they come in worried about, and worried about cardiovascular health. And so I have to re-educate them and let them know that it's not cholesterol that's causing the problem, but sugar oxidation, inflammation causing the problem. We need to get your body healthy to lose the weight, because health, weight gain is a symptom of being unhealthy. And so I think that's probably the biggest problem, is really getting them to focus on more protein and to be aware of what they're eating is really causing a lot of this gut dysfunction and digestive issues.
So what is when we talk about protein or carbs or fat, I always like to know, well, what is the food we're talking about? What is something that I could put on a plate and make sense of it, rather than
Right.
protein or carbs
Yeah.
or
So
fat?
when I mean protein, of course, it's animal protein, because we can't get the right amount of bioavailable protein from plants. You can get some, and you can live off of it, but you're never going to thrive. And so when people come into my program, it's not about normal. I don't want you to be normal. I don't want you to have normal health. If 88% of the population is sick and overweight and unhealthy, you don't want to be normal. You want to have exceptional living. So I want to get you to the point where you're thriving. So correct everything in the body at the same time by working on diet. So that's why I don't even play around with, like, oh, let's just cut your sugar. No, let's go straight to low carb, because this is what's going to work. This is what's going to help you reset your metabolism, because you have to balance the blood sugar. And if we don't get the blood sugar down, you can't reverse your risk for disease. And that's why I focus on both of those together.
So is it beef, chicken, lamb, goat, fish, oysters, lobster? I mean, where do we put it, and where does the fatty meat or the fatty cut come in versus the leaner cuts? Do you have any discussion about that?
So I kind of meet them where they're at. I don't
Hmm.
focus on fatty meat in the beginning. I focus on just getting them to eat more protein and to see which protein they'll eat. I look at their food sensitivity. Some people are sensitive to beef, so we're going to narrow in. That's why I like to do the food sensitivity test. I want your inflammation to go down. And so let's take out the foods that you're sensitive to for, 30 days minimum, 3 months to 6 months. Get that inflammation under control, then see how your body will tolerate that food. So if you're sensitive to beef, then we're going to eat the ones that you're not sensitive to. And so that's what I'm looking at. But overall, I mean, I eat beef and eggs is my main portion of the food that I eat. That's the protein that I get from my body. And for variety, I just round it out with salmon and some salmon and chicken. But I only do the chicken if I could get it free range, because
Hmm.
I like to eat the skin and I want it clean.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it
It,
is it is basically depending on each person's food sensitivities and what they will let themselves eat, because a lot of them are still having trouble digesting protein. And so they may have to start out with lighter protein. As they get healthier, I try to talk them into more red meat, but they do resist the red meat.
and when you say lighter proteins, what would you suggest in that range?
Well, that would be the chicken and the fish would be the lighter ones. So a lot of the time, most of the time, my ladies are not digesting their food. They can't digest
Hmm.
their protein. They're not digesting their fat. They could have, a lot of them have bile acid. So they're not even getting the bile acid to move, because they've cut back on their calories. They've cut back on their fat. They've cut back on their protein. Digestion stops. Your body's like, well, we don't have anything to do, so we're just going to take a break.
And their body's been so used to being a
Right.
low-fat diet
Mhm.
anyway, and so
Mhm.
their gallbladder just has been sitting there dysfunctional
Right,
for so
right.
long, it's just not working. Tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about the epigenetics of, individuality and how it, affects the role in disease, and how low-carb, nutrition may be helpful for that.
Yeah, I love epigenetics. I consider that part as something that saved my life,
Yeah.
and it's something to really think about because we are not stuck with the DNA we have. Just because we have obesity from our environment, you have to look at it as well, it's the environment that epigenetics is, it's turning on or off your DNA for the better or for the worse. And an example of that would be I'll start with the Pima Indians back in the early 1900s. Half of them went on a reservation in Arizona, the other half went to Mexico. Well, the half still living in Mexico are healthy, lean, living off the land and living the way their biology was designed, healthy, expressing good DNA. And so they didn't get obese and they don't have diabetes. However, their other half living in Arizona are huge, the most diabetic of the Indians, because they're eating white sugar, white flour, and not getting movement. And so their DNA expressed epigenetically into a disease state. And so as long as they continue to eat that diet, that's epigenetics, that's their environment, they're getting sick. And so that's the same genetic potential.
Wrong diet.
Wrong diet, exactly. And so
Right.
then I've been seeing pictures on Instagram recently, and I'm like, "Are people really that heavy?" And, I kinda get in my little bubble, and I'm not really noticing that much, but there was a
Mhm.
picture of people from 1950 at the beach, all slender, and then the other one of people, they use the most obese people and put them, and they're wearing swimwear, but they're at the beach, and that's the epigenetic process of eating the wrong diet for your body,
Mhm. Mhm.
of letting, your food become information. So food is information to your body. So if you're eating sugar and carbs all the time, your liver becomes dysfunctional because it can't stand up to all the sugar that it has to digest or has to process into fat. It's just going to store it away and store it away. But your body over time just is malfunctioning. Your sugar switch is flipped on and you're just going to get fatter. And it's not going to stop until you stop eating the foods that are causing that. So this is kind of how I look at epigenetics. And that's the thing is I call it flipping the sugar switch off. And when you flip that sugar switch off, your body just burns the fat instead of storing it.
What about women who are on a standard diet and they're lean, but they're still having problems with the depression and
Mhm.
other symptoms that I'm sure when you go through their symptom list, you find many of these problems. What's the difference?
So the difference is, it may not have caught up to them yet.
Mhm.
So there's where you can be skinny on the outside, but still fat on the inside with the visceral fat. And so there could be inflammation in the body. And over time, as hormones drop, then that becomes a more of a problem. I mean, I know of a story that's been going around on podcast, the story of Mimi, and she was slender until she had rheumatoid arthritis.
Mhm.
Then she had Parkinson's, eating low fat, low protein, standard diet that women will do to keep their weight off. That's what they're told. That's what we understand when and then yet you're not protected from nutrients. You're not getting the fat. You're not getting protein. There's not nutrients to your body. Your body is starving. And so you could be skinny, but you could still be in an epigenetic state where you've got a disease turned on. And so that's why, again, I like to call my program a weight loss and diabetes solution, because you flip that sugar switch off, you flipped your disease causing genes off. So if you're still having sugar and you're not getting fat and protein, you could be developing rheumatoid arthritis. You are developing autoimmunity in your gut because you kept the wheat in the diet. And then with all that sugar and inflammation and there's no nutrients to the heart, you could end up with a stroke, poor cardiovascular risk, and Parkinson's.
Dr. Rob Kiltz, another beautiful, spectacular day. And I just want to send thanks to all those for watching the newest episode of Carnivore Conversations. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple Music, and other streaming platforms to gain access to the full 1-hour episode. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more to come. God bless.